Good morning, everyone. I'm Roberta Schoenberg, the chair of the Grata Fund for Senior Care, an advisory council of the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Metro West, New Jersey. On behalf of the Grata Fund and the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation, I want to welcome you to the opening day of our 4-day Age-Friendly Communities New Jersey New Relevance Conference. Over the next 4 Tuesday mornings, the conference will be hosting 38 speakers who will challenge you to think differently about your community's concern for and inclusion of older adults. You will hear about an international movement that is changing community planning and integrating social, civic, and environmental requirements for dignified aging. By envisioning communities through the older adult lens, the benefits accrue to residents of all ages. Our experts will also demonstrate the relevance of age-friendly during COVID-19 and how their communities have responded to the pandemic. There will be interactive sessions focusing on how communities are harnessing strong relationships between municipal leaders, local organizations, and a diverse group of partners. We live in challenging times, and these age-friendly responses will have lasting impacts. A lot of hard work and time went into creating this conference. A special thank you to Rini Carniel, the Executive Director of the Grata Fund, and Julia Stumbo, the Senior Program Director of the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation. Their leadership and vision, along with their boards, have made this conference a reality. Thank you to our many speakers, including our grantees, partners, and colleagues, who have graciously sharing their energy, experience, collaborative spirit, and commitment to improving the lives of older adults. The staff of the Jewish Federation and the Jewish Community Foundation of Greater Metro West have worked tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure the success of this conference. Thank you to Federation and JCF. For today's programs, we ask that you use the chat box on your Zoom screen for questions or comments, and please note to whom they are directed. If you are having technical issues, please convey that through the Q&A box so we can assist you. Today's conference will address age-friendly in action. It will entail 2 45-minute sessions. It is now my pleasure to call upon Julia Stombos to introduce today's first session. Julia.
Roberta, for those opening remarks and for getting our conference session started today. It's my great pleasure to say a few words of introduction about our 2 keynote speakers that you're about to hear. Amy St. Peter from the Metro Phoenix area and Kathy Boyer-Schessel from the Kansas City region are both really assets to our field. The initiatives and the policies that they've helped to develop in their regions have had a really positive impact on professionals in our field across the country due to their really open, collaborative approach. And we're thrilled that they are available and willing to help us move our conference online. In fact, it is really in large part due to our collaboration with Amy and Kathy that the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation decided to create an age-friendly community initiative and now to expand it along with our partners at the Grata Fund for Senior Care. Here in New Jersey, most people are very well aware that our state has a home rule system of government with 565 municipalities that are made up of boroughs and townships and towns and cities and villages. And while it's true that other governments across the U.S. operate very differently from that, there are still lessons to be shared and best practices from elsewhere that certainly apply here. We are all facing similar challenges when it comes to the impact of disease outbreaks and racial disparities and climate change on the increasingly aging population. So any place that can create equitable community opportunities and as well as accessible public spaces Those things are needed everywhere, and we need to learn from each other. So based on what I know about Kathy and Amy's approach to their work, don't expect them to lay out a roadmap or a tidy checklist of the elements that add up to equal an age-friendly community, but you can expect them to hear them talk candidly and about the challenges and about the wrong turns, as well as the approaches that have worked out successfully for them in their own journeys. One thing that Amy and Kathy have reiterated over the years is that there's no real end to this work. And hopefully that provides some job security for all of us. Age-friendly community work evolves over time, and there's a learning process that is continual, which is why it's very beneficial to us, and we're thrilled to have two wonderful mentors to help guide our work in New Jersey. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kathy Boyer-Schessel from the Mid-America Regional Council and Amy St. Peter from Maricopa Association of Governments. They will help us understand what can happen when an age-friendly community approach is more broadly embraced and becomes an integral part of the way a region does business. Kathy and Amy, I transfer the session over to you with much appreciation for providing our kickoff today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julia. And folks, if you can't hear me, if it's too loud, too soft, please do let me know. Happy to make any adjustments as needed. Really, really excited to be here. Thank you so much for having Kathy and I. We're excited to join you, to learn from you, and to share our insights with you. If I can get the next slide, please. One of the first things that we wanted to share is this new bingo card that we've developed in collaboration with Julia and with Rini as well. Now, bingo normally is a game or maybe even a song, but in this context, bingo is a calling. It's a challenge. It's an invitation to you to make your communities more age-friendly, to embrace these age-friendly concepts by connecting older adults with people of all ages with their communities. This work is critically important. In an evaluation survey from one of our providers, they asked their clients to respond to this statement: I am living my best possible life. Consider for a moment, if we're living our best possible lives, if our clients are, if our communities are, if we can follow these age-friendly concepts featured now on the bingo card, we will help people to live their best possible lives. We will empower them to be able to connect with their communities, to give back, to live their most authentic life as well. Each person is valued in our communities, and with these concepts, we can help to demonstrate that value by engaging them fully in their communities. Now, the elements in this card, there isn't any community that has all of these. But I can tell you that every single community will have aspects of these, and through intentional focus action with diverse partners, we can make our communities more age-friendly by putting these concepts into place, by strengthening them, by growing them, by cultivating them. So we ask you to review this, to keep it in mind throughout the conference. So when you listen to the different speakers, consider what tips and tools they're offering you to help you to embed these concepts in your community, to strengthen the concepts that you already have, and to figure out barriers that need to be removed in order to bring these concepts to full maturity. So please, throughout the event, do take a look at this bingo card and really consider how you can embed these concepts. And thank you very much. I'm glad that you're liking the card. It's great to get that feedback. It was fun to put it together, but also very meaningful. It gives us a focus point that we can use to help align our work with a really important needed change that's important to all of our communities. Next slide, please. Now, this is our journey, and like Julia said, we don't often have a roadmap. Usually we are creating it as we journey on, as we travel. It doesn't always look like this either. The important thing is to get everybody on board, be really inclusive, get everybody on board, buckle up, and enjoy the ride. There will be the bumps in the road, there will be the wrong turns, but together we can create that map, not just for our community, but for so many other communities around us who really need to engage in this kind of work. Next slide, please. There we go. So before we start talking about the what or even the how, I really want to focus just for a moment on the why. This why is critically, critically important, because all too often we focus on the left-hand side of the screen. We focus only on the deficiencies, the gaps, the problems of older adults. And we unintentionally sometimes completely ignore their strengths and their skill sets. Sometimes we do this in very subtle ways, like by only having pictures of frail older adults in our materials. That's absolutely part of the population that we need to engage, but there's a lot of people. And really honestly, we all have needs and we all have gifts. And the more that we acknowledge that, the more that we can really be inclusive and authentic in all of our work. So a number of years ago, we held an art competition. And we asked every single person, no matter their age, to illustrate for us what it looks like to get older. And the results were pretty insightful. And so for some children, they're honestly nervous. They said, I'm not sure if I want to get older. I'm scared. And for some older adults, they were kind of saying the same thing. But for some older adults, particularly Shirley Cunningham, who painted the picture that you see on the right-hand side of your screen, she called this forest primeval, and she was excited about getting older. She really braced her later years as a period of discovery. And so in Forest Primeval, she's communicating to us, she's illustrating for us her perspective on what it's like to get older. And she said that this Forest Primeval is full of mature growth, ancient growth, but it's also completely full of new trails, new vistas, just waiting to be discovered. And so our jobs, our calling, is to connect people with the opportunities to walk through this forest primeval, to connect them with those new vistas, to help them travel those new trails that will help them to be more connected to their communities, to really build this culture of empowerment. Now, I'll let you know that we ourselves have to be really vigilant about keeping this mindset. It's all too easy to shift back into the left-hand side of the screen. We constantly have to nudge ourselves back to that right-hand side of the screen, because people's lives are at stake. People live better lives, their best possible lives, if they're connected with that culture of empowerment, and if they're traveling on those exciting new trails and seeing those new vistas in their later years. Next slide, please. And so as we're undertaking this work, we have moments of discovery. And now when some people look at this picture, this is taken from an art program here in the city of Mesa in Arizona. For some people looking at this, they're excited, they're intrigued, this is compelling to them. For other people, it might seem kind of awkward, and they're saying, I don't know if I want to be in that circle, that looks kind of uncomfortable. And you know what, candidly, the work is all of the above. It's inspiring, it can feel uncomfortable sometimes. The point though is to stay with that uncomfortable awkwardness to get to the points that are really impactful and to get to those breakthroughs. And it's really critically important as we're doing this work, particularly with diverse partners, because we don't have a shared language necessarily. We don't have a shared history. We don't yet have shared connections. So we need to develop those shared values and those shared priorities. And then we need to align our work with it. We need to check back early and often to make sure that we're continuing that alignment. And thank you. And so as we're engaging in this work, I really encourage you to bring everyone into the circle and to work through whatever feelings might come about to get to the really exciting part of the work. Next slide, please. Now for us, this is our history. This is our pattern that we've seen over the past 10 years or so. We've reimagined ourselves a number of times in a number of ways over the last decade. And so as you can see, we've changed our name. We've started off regionally and then we went statewide. And all of these changes happen because we're constantly assessing, are we still aligning with our community? Are we still meeting the needs and priorities, empowering the strengths of every community that we're working with right now? I'd like to give special thanks to the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust and to Grantmakers in Aging for their enduring support throughout this journey. We're also very excited about a new partnership with the Harry and Jeanette Weinberg Foundation that's making it possible to launch transportation services in rural communities right now. But the focus throughout has been on community. It's been connecting older adults with their communities. And we do so through a variety of methods. We are agnostic in terms of the model. We have launched villages and time banks and transportation services, depending on what are the needs, attributes, strengths, and priorities of each community that we're working with. And we've worked with more than 24 at this point. Next slide, please. Now, this work is only possible because of our partnerships. And it takes a lot of diverse partners to make this work authentic and holistic. And so when we're considering who do we need to be working with, we look to older adults and we take a look at what's important to them. What are they filling their life with? Is it the health? Is it the arts? Is it being outdoors. And then we find partners who are experts in those areas who can help us with their deep dive and their analysis and their connections, their circles of influence. And, you know, it's really important because as we're adding these partners to our network, they might come to our first meeting because they're interested in the topic. They might come to the second meeting, maybe because they like us. They're not coming to the third meeting though, if we don't add value to them. And so we need to honor each partner's priorities and make sure that we're adding value to them. We're helping them achieve their mission. We are making their jobs easier. We're making their lives easier because of this partnership. And when we're able to demonstrate that, we keep people at the table for the long term. We also need to acknowledge that we all have different pain points and drivers. We have different motivations, different areas of sensitivity. We need to be real about those. We need to acknowledge them, and then we need to mitigate them and make sure that each person can come into this work fully. And we're very focused as well on developing a peer-to-peer network because people help each other more than we can help them most of the time. And so that peer-to-peer network is really important to building the capacity, because if we aren't building capacity in our partners and our communities, we're actually doing them a disservice. We're making them dependent on us when really we need to be interdependent with each other. Next slide, please. So these are some of the insights and the challenges that we faced, as well as the tips that we would offer. The first one about insights, that is an actual photo from one of the brave women from one of our communities here in the West Valley in Greater Phoenix. She went skydiving and didn't tell her family until afterwards. And I think that's a great example of people are ready. They are hungry for the kind of change that we can bring about through this work. And so we need to move because people are really ready right now. They're willing, they're able. We just need to make sure that we're empowering them in their individual lifestyle choices. And two, excuse me, in terms of challenges, we need to be real about that as well, particularly working with partners who have served in this space for a number of years, the traditional provider. They may very justifiably be nervous about our work. Some of our closest partners now are the ones who are only around initially because they didn't trust us. And now they trust us because we're able to show value to them. We show them that we respect the work that they've done, and that there is a seat for them at the table. There's a role for them within this work, this greater work, this collective impact that we're all co-creating right now. And if I were to recommend anything, it's be brave and be clunky. Mistakes will be made. You will take wrong turns. The map will just look fuzzy and non-existent. But if you're honest about those challenges, if you're working together, if you keep up those lines of communication, you will get through it and you will be stronger for it. And so I really encourage you to honor each community's timeline. They know what they need. I firmly believe that the answers that every community needs are within that community. Our role isn't to bring them the answers. Our role is to help them unlock and embed and integrate their own answers, to put their own dreams into place and to implement those fully. And so that engagement, that outreach is critical, because without that, we don't know what their needs and their priorities are. Next slide, please. So as we're looking at this engagement, we need to ask ourselves, is the community the sculptor that's creating this work, or the sculpture, what's being created by this work? Now, depending on what we're doing, the community will take a different seat on the bus each time. Sometimes we are telling them things that we've learned. A lot of times, hopefully, we're listening to them really intently. But hopefully, ideally, we are partnering with the community. Outreach, honestly, is messy and it's slow and sometimes it's frustrating, but it's also really essential, because if we don't have our finger on the pulse of the community, then we aren't serving them. We're doing something to them, and that's seldom helpful or sustainable. And so as we're going through this, we really need to look at building that capacity within the community, partnering with them, teaching them, learning from them, and being able to create something better together. A sign of our success, and we made a lot of mistakes in the beginning and we still make them now, but one of the first lessons learned for us was learning that the real sign of success was not necessarily meeting in people's conference rooms and bringing them to us, but by going to them, literally meeting in people's living rooms. That's when we knew that we were fully embedded within the community and that work would be sustainable and owned by the community for the long term. Next slide, please. So if we could consider just for a moment, what do you want to grow? What do you want to build? How will the landscape look different because of your work? What change are you trying to create? Can you see it in your head? When you can see it in your head and feel it in your heart, you can gather everyone else and inspire them to see that same vision, and your own vision will be impacted by theirs as well. We're planting seeds together, and different kinds of plants will sprout up. We need to water them. We need to tend them. We need to appreciate all the different colors and varieties that we have in our gardens. And so when we're looking at this, we also really want to focus on what are we harvesting together? What are the fruits, literally and figuratively, of our labor? When do we harvest that? Who's there? And with whom do we share this work? Next slide, please. So this work changed quite a bit. The landscape changed dramatically, and probably, honestly, will not go back to what it was. It will be different. Hopefully at some point it will be better, but it's been hard. It's been hard for our clients, for our providers, for our communities. COVID-19 has really reshaped the way that we live life. Our circles of priority have gotten a lot smaller and much more intense. And I can tell you that COVID really amplified the importance of this work, of being incredibly inclusive. And, you know, there are a number of challenges, absolutely. There's also some striking benefits, though. One of the benefits is that I think a broader array of people now have empathy for the social isolation that older adults face on a daily basis. They've lived it. They may be living it still. It's salient to them. It's something that they can feel and touch and taste now because they've been living with it now, probably for a number of months. And so this really helps us in our messaging and our outreach to people because they now have tasted social isolation and they might be more willing to get on board with making sure that no one has to suffer that again. And so our providers have pivoted here in Arizona very impressively. Instead of bringing older adults, for example, to the grocery store, they're now bringing the food to the older adults. They have online Zoom and bingo and book clubs, and it's just amazing the ways that they've been able to reach out. And that's partially possible, in large part, really, thanks to the funders for being flexible, for allowing us to change our service delivery model, sometimes within a week to say, this is no longer working or relevant, we need to pivot. And they're able to do that. So thank you to our funders, to our providers, for their bravery, their courage, for being able to sustain in these really, really difficult times. During this period, we've actually launched new and expanded transportation services for older adults. Again, changing that service model to be relevant to them, to help them to stay safe and to feel safe in their homes, in their communities, and when they're moving in between. And so we have our rural transportation incubator, and we've changed what the second year looks like completely. We've allowed people to use the stipend that they receive from this to support existing transportation services, not just new and expanded, because we want to honor the work that's been underway for years and make sure that it will be there tomorrow. Next slide, please. So I am excited to learn from you, to hear your questions. I'm excited for you as well to hear from your next speaker, Kathy. She is a fantastic leader in this age-friendly space. I first came to know her when we were working together on a national initiative called Community Agenda. And she's been doing great work since then, before then, and into the future. So we're very fortunate to have Kathy joining us today. She works at a sister agency to the Maricopa Association of Governments. She works at the Mid-America Regional Council in the Kansas City region. So at this point now, I'd like to turn this over to Kathy, unless you want to pause now and ask some questions. Kathy?
Me. But I always learn from what Maricopa County is doing. And like Amy, I'm anxious to, throughout your series of sessions over the next month, to learn about what is happening in New Jersey. So thank you for including the Kansas City region's experience in your opening session. So please, next slide. As Amy mentioned, I'm with the Mid-America Regional Council of Governments, and so our program targets specifically local jurisdictions, so a little bit different than what Amy presented. So my message today for you all is really our experience with the local governments that are participating in our age-friendly community program. So in 2013, we partnered with the First Suburbs Coalition to develop a program to help initially the first suburbs, which are the older suburbs that popped up around the Kansas City, Missouri area after World War II. And so these were the suburbs that were experiencing the first real indicators of the increased longevity of their residents, that they're going to be aging into their 80s and 90s, and that their interests are different, their community assets. So they ask themselves, are we prepared for an increased older adult population? And what do we need to do to put into place? So our program was developed, again, with the partnership of First Suburbs Coalition. We were guided by the World Health Organization's Age-Friendly Community Program that they had started long before Kansas City region even began to think about the increase of older adults and the increased longevity of our population. We developed a program that has 3 phases. The first is characterized by building awareness. Cities have either focus groups or task forces, resident surveys. We bring awareness presentations to the local jurisdictions, the elected body of whether it's the Board of Aldermen or the City Council. We have presentations in front of park boards and zoning commissions, and probably most importantly is to the department heads. So it's a series of awareness activities that a city designs for themselves with the support of Mid-America Regional Council. The second is the awareness phase, which cities go through a self-assessment of a variety of policies and programs on topic areas that are typical of age-friendly community programs, no matter what model that you might be using. And then the final is an implementation where it's an age lens is applied to a major city plan. So I wanted to I jotted down a couple notes that from both Roberta and Amy's, that one of the parts that's really important is though that this is a regional program that provides the structure. Each community really localizes this in a way that is important to them, their residents and their culture and what is important to them. So as we go through this, we now have close to 19 communities and 1 county that are participating in this program. And it really is designed by their staff, their elected officials, and their residents. We also, Amy referenced our work with Community Agenda, and which was through the Pfizer Foundation and Grant Makers in Aging. And part of the work with the funder was to think about sustainability, so that when their funding would eventually go away, how can this program be sustained? So a couple activities that I wanted to just share with you, because it's been integral to the ongoing success and sustainability of the work here in the Kansas City region, is that we instituted what we call a peer support group of champions in our, not only the communities that have officially signed on, but communities that are seriously considering participation. They come together every other month to share their progress and successes and challenges. And then we typically have a presentation on a local topic that is supportive of age-friendly community works. It could be resiliency or emergency preparedness or transportation. And then we have what we call professional network, and we bring in, as much as funding will allow us, national experts in topic areas that are supportive of age-friendly community work, like universal design or transportation-oriented development is a couple examples. So next slide, please. So our gold level communities so far that have moved to the policy adoption, we have a couple of communities that developed specific master plans that they called communities for all ages. We have communities that are applying an age lens to their updated comp plans or strategic plans. We have a couple of communities that apply the age lens to their master parks plan. And we have a community that will be applying for gold level later on this year, and they're applying the age lens to their updated bicycle master plan. So as you go to the next slide, I'll just reiterate that the age lens that's applied to a major city plan is determined by the city on what kind of plan is most important to them. So what we're realizing with communities that go through the recognition program, it always leads to enhanced discussions and policy development. That it's amazing to see and to hear from our champions often that they'll talk about that they were in a zoning commission meeting, or maybe it was a park board meeting, or a city council meeting where a council member, and it may even have been a council member that was a little reluctant when we first, when this program was first brought to their attention. And they're quoting, well, this sounds like a policy, or this sounds like an element that is, that's a communities for all ages, and maybe we should think about this. So it's really amazing to hear about the transformation that age-friendly community work can do in our region. And I suspect that those of you that have been working over the last couple of years in the New Jersey initiative understand exactly what I'm saying, that you're seeing this as well. So there are a couple examples that I wanted to share that with the accessory dwelling units, this was a new concept several years ago when we started this. Some of our local jurisdictions actually had this in their books, that they allow accessory dwelling units. But now it's with a lens of, now I understand why accessory dwelling units are useful and helpful to those who want to successfully age in place. We have one of our communities, Raymore, Missouri, who actually expanded their ADU ordinance from one residential zoning area in their community to all residential zoning areas to allow residents to apply for accessory dwelling units. Some of our other cities that have had this on their books are now able to promote this in a different way, and other communities are beginning to elevate this discussion with their elected officials and their planning commissions. With universal design, we've been holding workshops and other forms of awareness building on the value of universal design for many years. And most recently, and it's the same city, Raymore, Missouri, actually entered into a public-private partnership with a local developer to build a residential home using universal design standards. And the city waived about $9,000 of permits and fees. And in return, the developer has agreed to have the house be open for a month for open houses for other developers, architects, residents, staff, just whoever, to walk through a universal design house with some promotion on universal design standards. And so this is being allowed for a month before actually putting the home on the market. So it's a really great way to see how cities are thinking about their partners, but also elevating and advancing their own policies to promote ways that residents can successfully age in community and age in place. One of our communities is doing a comprehensive review of all existing city codes with the intent to apply an age lens when appropriate. And with outdoor spaces, all of our communities are looking at outdoor spaces in ways that, with the increased longevity of their residents, and that everybody wants to enjoy trails, and grandparents want to go to the parks to watch their grandchildren play soccer or softball or whatever it is, or maybe just play with their grandchildren. So universal design, again, is raised that it's just not enough to get to the park, where ADA standards typically will allow you to get there and park. But with universal design, it elevates it to that you can actually experience the park in ways through connectivity and really the design, thinking about all ages and abilities, so that you can actually get from the parking lot to the area where your grandchildren may be playing soccer. And also there's enhanced discussions and actions taken on non-traditional city services, such as social isolation, that cities may be encouraging their parks and rec departments to do virtual programming, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but as everybody's pivoted to doing everything virtual, so that it may be evidence-based programs such as the Aging Mastery Program or falls prevention or some chronic chronic disease self-management, so that it's connecting folks to each other and to programs that are helpful to their health. And also community partnerships that in the days of COVID, it was surprising to me how many of our local jurisdictions weren't aware of local health departments, but now that's a partnership that's really, really very important. Some of our cities with with non-traditional city services that have expanded their awareness of elder abuse. So with Elder Abuse Awareness Day, their fountains are turned purple, and they're doing social media posts and other awareness activities around identifying and responding to elder abuse and neglect. So those are just a couple examples of how cities are looking at partnerships to expand their role in helping their residents age healthy and with a high quality of life. So next slide, please. So we tried to measure, is this work having any impact? So a couple years ago, we developed a survey that we presented to elected officials, all of the elected officials and key management staff of our recognition cities that were either at the silver or gold level, because they had been more immersed into the principles by that time. And so if you'll go to the next slide. So we asked them pre and post. So before your city participated in this program, what were your attitudes? And now thinking about where you're at today after participation in this program, what are your attitudes? Have they shifted? So, and I'm just pulling out 2 or 3 of the questions that we asked. There are far more that we asked, but these were the most interesting that I thought that would excite you, because they excite me. So we asked, again, elected officials and key management staff about their perception of older adults, and did it change as a result of their participation. So you can see on this slide, there was a dramatic change of just simple perceptions of older adults before participation in an age-friendly community program, and then after. It's very dramatic about that shift. And of course, we assume that this shift is all positive. And so hopefully you will take on that same attitude as well, that it's a positive shift. And the next slide, we ask the perception of, or the level of understanding of their city's role in community planning to support aging in place. So these would be about an understanding about built environment, policies and discussions, and partnerships with other local organizations, and what the city's communication activities are. So you'll see again the pre and post, the level of understanding of their role, their city's role in how they plan for their community was a dramatic increase in a positive understanding that was as to their role. And then the final slide, I believe, for the survey was asking for their perception or attitude in the role that older adults might play in involving themselves in community planning. So either serving on zoning, planning and zoning boards, or the Park District Board, or even just task force or focus groups. Again, you'll see a dramatic increase in their perception about the role that older adults might play in helping and within the community planning functions of the city. So the next slide, which is really just reiterating the key takeaways from the pre-post, that there's a 13% increase on the personal perceptions of the value of older adults. There is an impressive increase in understanding their own city's role in community planning to support successful aging in place. And responsibility, there is a huge increase in appreciation of the role of local jurisdictions play related to older adults. And there was an impressive increase in the attitude perception of the role of older adults in community and city planning. So next slide, please. So key lessons learned prior to COVID, because some of these shifted, is the impact in placing the age-friendly community within local jurisdictions, because some models place the responsibility of implementing an age-friendly community in other entities. Maybe it's a nonprofit or another area, but with our model, we place the responsibility within the local jurisdictions. We found, again, through surveying of our folks, that it was really key to have a structured program that they could follow. They could localize it and make it their own, but having a structured program was really critical to their participation and their continued participation in the program. It also required key buy-in from elected officials. There is a structured immersion of department heads and commissions into drilling down to have a deeper understanding. There's an identification of city and regional partners to enhance age-friendly actions. Most cities didn't really think outside of their own bailiwick, and so this program helped them to think and identify partners to help them achieve their goals. And then with policy adoption, it coupled with cultural transformation. As I mentioned earlier, that folks would refer back to this program in other discussions within the city. This work takes time, and understanding that competing demands may delay progress. And an example would certainly be COVID. Residents are so eager to become engaged in envisioning age-friendly community work. And transformation is not just a dream, it's a reality that we see play out with these communities. And the next slide, which I think is the final slide. So what we've learned with COVID, we surveyed local jurisdictions this year to find out, was it helpful to be in an age-friendly community program, and how was it helpful? But what we learned is that cities were really, I don't know that anyone was really prepared to respond to COVID. They really, it went down into the alligator that was nipping at their ankle today. They pivoted to essential services. They began to focus on their own transitioning to remote work so that their employees could continue to work safely from their home, building remote capacity that just wasn't on their radar, understanding elusive guidelines. I don't know about your area, but we're on 2 states, 9 counties, so that the guidelines were very different in responding to those. We did see that there's an enhanced appreciation on developing community partners. And as we structure this work next year, we're going to be putting a far greater focus on helping local jurisdictions identify key community partnerships, such as health departments and nonprofits, and ways that they can rely on those partnerships to help them through not just COVID, but other emergencies that might arise, or that will arise probably. And then finally, with learning that many adult children are moving their parents out of congregate settings, whether they were nursing homes or assisted living, back into their homes to live with them, either regarding just the risk of being in congregate settings, or not being able to visit. So the negative consequences of having their older adults isolated. It raised the appreciation of universal design's role in housing, so that when you do bring older adults back into your home is designed in a way to support their successful aging in place, even if it's aging in place in your home temporarily. So next slide, please. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions. And I think this turned back maybe to Julia.
Yes, hi.
Okay.
Thank you both. I think the people on the call, the audience, can certainly understand why the two of you are recognized as leaders in the field, and forward thinking, and really recognizing the value of partnerships, and really giving your partners a role in moving forward and helping you with your plans, and admiring them as well. So we do have a few questions in the chat box. We've had a little bit of difficulty with people getting into the meeting, and I apologize for that. We're working on it. There was some kind of a limit set up that we're not aware of, and the team in the background is working on fixing that now. So advice from Amy and Kathy that I just want to emphasize before we go into the questions: being brave, being clunky, being honest, keeping up the lines of communication. I think all those things are super important as we get started, and also as groups who haven't embarked on this work yet are getting started, and as well as the fascination of the data and how it can be used to influence public will and include older adults in all of the community planning. That those are critical messages. So one of the questions was, have you experienced, one question was about accessory dwelling units. If you experienced any pushback, either one of you experienced that in your communities where density may have been a concern, and if so, how was that addressed? Do either of you, Amy or Kathy, have experience with accessory dwelling units?
I think my response to this is that with communities that go through this process, the pushback is typically NIMBY, literally not in my backyard, but as they go through the process and they learn about residents and their really hunger to remain in communities, by the time that it gets to the elected officials to approve these ordinances, they're more they're just more embraced.
Right. And if I could just add to that for a moment, we found that the market is a really good driver in this space. So the developers are responding to the needs of their consumers. And a lot of consumers are wanting casitas, they're wanting the mother-in-law apartment. I mean, it goes by any number of different names, but they're wanting that accessory, that dwelling unit, so they can, and it's good for older adults, it's good for adult children, you know, the college students. I mean, it's good on so many different levels. And so I think being able to work with the developers has been very helpful, because if we can raise awareness about what's available, often they're raising awareness for us in terms of how they can respond, what kind of housing they can develop. And that's been incredibly helpful.
Thank you both. That's helpful information. We probably won't have time to get to all of the questions, but we will keep them from the chat and the Q&A and present them to Amy and Kathy after the session so that they can get back to some of you. We did hear Kathy talk a little bit about metrics to measure success, so I think I'm going to move to a different question. One person is asking about a very important issue, curious about our efforts to be more inclusive and ensuring that these programs are senior friendly for people of color. Could either one of you talk a little bit to that?
Mm-hmm. You know, that's really where the outreach is critical. Being age friendly takes on a completely different flavor depending on the culture. In some cultures, they're already very inclusive, and they're already living in multi-generational homes, and so it resonates very differently. And so it's really important with the messaging, with the outreach, with the data, to be able to really dial in and to be aware of those nuances. So for us, that community outreach has really been a driver. And Julia, I'm not sure if it's possible. I know there's a question to put our contact information, that first slide, back up on the screen. And I would really encourage folks, so please do reach out to us. That's my direct line, my email address. That's on the slide. If we can go back to that, perhaps. And if not, then I'm sure that I'm sure that the slides will be shared. But if there's any other questions, really encourage you to reach out.
And I just might add, for us, it really is kind of a directive as we plan our and structure our goals for next year. It is around developing partnerships with community organizations and a better understanding of racial inequities.
Thank you. It's a focus we need to all make sure we figure out together and keep working on. I think that we're going to need to transition. So I really appreciate everyone's participation and questions that you've entered. We will get back to you. There's Amy's and Kathy's contact information. Please do feel free to reach out. You can see that through trial and error, they have figured out a lot of excellent ways to implement some lasting improvements in their communities. And we thank you, both of you, for sharing your journey with us, and look forward to hearing from you in other sessions throughout the conference. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
So as we shift to our next group of speakers, get ready for a lot of energy from our New Jersey contingency. They're enthusiastic to share what's been going on right in our own backyards. I'm delighted to turn the session over to one of our partners in this work, resident researcher and facilitator extraordinaire, Dr. Emily Greenfield, professor of social work at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. So Emily, welcome.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you all for being in this digital space together. It's my pleasure to introduce our next panel titled In Our Backyards, Insights from Leaders of Age-Friendly Community Initiatives in New Jersey. And for the sake of time, I'm going to ask if you can just advance to the final slide in the deck. I'll just skip right over so we can get into our speakers. One more slide. Okay, great. And you can just put everybody up there. Yep, perfect. Thanks. Okay, so we are so fortunate at this very moment to have the opportunity to hear from a lineup of 4 terrific speakers who are age-friendly pioneers in New Jersey. We will hear from Drs. Katie York, Kathy Rowe, and Ms. Jackie Cates, each of whom have been working collaboratively for several years as leaders of age-friendly community initiatives at the municipal level in our state. But first, we will hear from Ms. Christine Newman, who will give us a statewide perspective on this work from AARP New Jersey, where she serves as the Director of Community Outreach and Volunteer Engagement. So Christine, I'm going to pass the digital microphone right over to you.
Great, thank you, Emily. So I'm going to start off teeing up our discussion with sort of the 30,000-foot view of the AARP network of age-friendly communities. We're going to be looking at trends in community focus areas, as well as demographics across the network, and then taking a look and comparing that to our network here in New Jersey. And then I want to spend some time as well specifically talking about trends and learnings across the network related to the COVID-19 pandemic and the implications of this for our age-friendly network. Slide, please. So just for anyone who might not be familiar, AARP is the United States affiliate for the World Health Organization's global network of age-friendly communities. As such, AARP works with communities on enrollment into that network, and then as a partner, a resource, and a convener, as communities go through a 5-year cycle of community assessment, action plan, implementation, and evaluation. And all of that work is organized in a structure called the 8 Domains of Livability framework that's used by the World Health Organization and AARP. So this is a snapshot of the current age-friendly network across the country. So you can just get an idea. And if you go to the next slide, please. So across the country, we have nearly 100 million people who are covered by an age-friendly initiative. As of today, there are 472 communities across the country. That includes 5 states: New York, Massachusetts, Colorado, Florida, Michigan, and Maine. And it also includes 1 territory with the US Virgin Islands. Next slide, please. Here in New Jersey, we have nearly 830,000 individuals that are covered by an age-friendly initiative. We have 14 communities in total that are part of the AARP World Health Organization age-friendly network. We also have 1 county. And the typical demographics that we see here in New Jersey span anywhere from small suburban communities to large urban settings. Next slide, please. And across the network, there's different models in terms of how this work is shaped and formed. So you can see here, single community model. This is the most common across the network and here in New Jersey. So this is an individual municipality, township, or borough that joins. We also have a county-based model where either a county joins alone or a county may join in conjunction with specific municipalities that are located in that county. Interestingly, this is the fastest growing model we're seeing right now across the country. And actually in New Jersey, that's reflected here as well, as we had our first county that joined this year. Next slide, please. We also have regionally based models that you'll see across the network nationally. So this could be a group of towns that have a similar demographic, are located very closely together geographically. An example here in New Jersey would be SOMA, so South Orange and Maplewood, who work together. And then the last model is what we call a limited resources model. So this might be areas where there's less population density, more rural, again with limited resources, so those communities pool together for their age-friendly initiatives. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, here in New Jersey, this is a snapshot of our 14 communities. Princeton was the first to join, followed by Montclair in 2014 and 15. And then you can see really around 2018, that's when a lot of our Northern New Jersey age-friendly communities came on board in the network as well. And we're continuing to grow. We've had communities join. And like I said, this year, Somerset County became the first county in the state to join the network. And we're just thrilled about that. But we've also had Wayne and West Orange join this year as well. If we can go to the next slide, please. And as I mentioned, across the country, really the unifying thread for all of these communities is this idea that the places where we live and we call home are more livable, and they're better able to support people of all ages when local leaders commit to improving the quality of life for the very young, the very old, and everyone in between. And the way our age-friendly communities do that is following this model of the 8 domains of livability. Across our network, typically the most popular or the domains that are focused on the most are communication, transportation, and housing. Next slide, please. So I want to spend the balance of my time talking about some of the trends and learnings that we've seen specifically in communities across the country since the COVID-19 pandemic, and especially when it comes to the domains of focus. So AARP released a survey to all of our age-friendly communities back in June, really to get some baseline data and information about how COVID-19 has impacted age-friendly work, and also how age-friendly initiatives in a community have maybe helped in responding to that crisis. So we received responses from about a quarter of all of our communities. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the communities that did respond and kind of gives you a reflection of across the network some of the demographics that we see. So typically, a majority of these communities identified as small town, suburban, urban. New Jersey, as I mentioned, most of ours kind of span from suburban to urban as well. Next slide, please. Additionally, the communities that responded to the survey have similar structures that we see here in New Jersey, with the lead age-friendly organization typically being either a government agency, an advisory council, volunteers that are leading the initiative in community, a senior center, or a local nonprofit that takes the lead. Next slide, please. So in terms of trends that really bubbled to the top, and this was something I heard both Amy and Kathy mention in the previous session, was really that partnerships, and specifically partnerships with diverse organizations, as well as prior efforts that were already underway to improve in the communication domain, were really critical and were the top elements of an age-friendly initiative that were seen as the most helpful in responding to COVID-19. Next slide, please. Additionally, to having these diverse partnerships in place, typically members who responded said that their age-friendly efforts prepared them to respond to COVID-19 better due to having a volunteer base in place that was able to quickly respond. Having activities that were already happening that could be pivoted to address the changing in needs. And also communities that were doing work already around emergency and disaster planning. Most communities that responded to our survey indicated they were working on activities that positioned them well to respond. Specifically though, the domains of social participation, communication, community and health services, and civic participation. So really looking at more of the social programmatic domains versus built environment domains were seen as critical for this pivot during COVID-19. And I know my colleagues speaking next on the panel will be sharing some of their initiatives, highlights, and successes that really demonstrate what we know, not just during a time of crisis, but also in general. And if you go to the last slide, please. Which is this, that when we think about what's the secret sauce for these initiatives, whether it's in a time of crisis or day to day, but I think becomes even more important during a time of crisis, it's really this. It's this idea of partnerships. How do you have what we sometimes refer as the usual suspects, working with older adults, and unusual partners. So how are you engaging your downtown, your businesses, and then also initiatives that combine both policy and programmatic elements are critical. And that really at the heart is local citizenry that is engaged and helping to lead and drive this work. So that's really what we see as sort of the bullseye. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Katie York, who will be sharing experiences and best practices from Montclair's Age Friendly initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I have my contact information here if anyone is interested, but for the sake of time, next slide, please. For those of you who aren't familiar with New Jersey geography, Montclair is that little green dot there. It's located 13 miles outside of New York City, and it's in the same county as the Newark Airport. New Jersey's capital, Trenton, is located farther south, as you can see by the orange flag. Next slide, please. Montclair is known for its diverse population, big old homes, and its thriving arts community. The second largest university in the state resides in Montclair, as well as an art museum, live theaters, art galleries, and a wide range of boutiques. Montclair's lively business districts are flush with restaurants, movie theaters, shops, and nightlife that attract visitors from all over the region. And last year, Montclair celebrated its 150th anniversary. Next slide, please. In February 2014, this initiative was launched. It was a collaboration between the Partners for Health Foundation and the Township of Montclair's Department of Health and Human Services, where they launched an Aging in Place in Montclair initiative. We thought that name and brand was kind of blah, so we transitioned to Lifelong Montclair a few months later. A year after the initiative started, we joined the World Health Organization and AARP network of age-friendly communities. We were realizing that the network really aligned with the work that we were doing up to that point. In 2016, the township voted to create a division and a position. So they created a division of senior services / Lifelong Montclair that's housed within the Department of Health and Human Services. And in February 2018, Montclair's Age-Friendly Action Plan was accepted by the World Health Organization. And earlier this year, we submitted our progress update for the action plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about our work, mostly highlighting on the before COVID times, because I think that there are definitely some things that you probably already are prepared for now that we're about 6 months in. So I do want to share that insight into our work in the hopes of inspiring you to implement or expand age-friendly work within your communities. One of our earliest projects was taking advantage of low-hanging fruit. An intern, whenever you have a chance to snag an intern, do so. An intern compiled a directory of senior services within the town, and then our Senior Citizens Advisory Committee edited, and we printed and distributed thousands of copies. As an extension of this project, a working group convened, and we intentionally included a non-tech fluent older resident to develop an online version of this directory, which you can see on the right there. We wanted to make sure that the directory could be navigated regardless of tech fluency of the user. Shameless plug, Ann Lapel is the chair of the Senior Citizens Advisory Committee, and she was a major player in this project and basically everything I do. She will be presenting on partnerships on September 29th, so be sure that you don't miss that. Next slide, please. Some of our other projects have emerged thanks to our partnership with the Montclair Art Museum. I'm just going to highlight this one partnership right now. We've partnered with the Art Museum to offer free high-level lifelong learning classes through our Montclair Institute for Lifelong Learning, or the MIL. In an effort to counter ageism, we also partnered with them for the Self-Portraits Faces of Aging initiative. Next slide, please. In this project, older residents created self-portraits and reflected on what aging means. And then we combined the quotes and the art, and it was displayed at the Montclair Art Museum, on the township website, and on posters and street banners throughout town. Next slide, please. And here are some zoomed in versions of the banners. So you can see the level of talent from people who have not done any self-portraits in the past before, but I think the outcome was pretty amazing. Next slide, please. So the Art Museum is just one of our many and diverse partner organizations who make our age-friendly efforts possible. It is my opinion that partner organizations are a vital part of a successful age-friendly initiative, and the more and diverse partner organizations you can recruit and work together with, the better. Next slide, please. Some other thoughts to get your wheels turning. In the culmination of our lifelong learning year, we had a lifelong learning choral class, which then had a concert and luncheon to celebrate the end of the year. It was a great way for people to gather back in the before times, as I call it, but that's something that certainly could be held virtually as well. On the right is a photo from a travel training trip conducted by NJ Tippett Rutgers. You can hear more about their work from Karen Alexander during the Mobility and Transportation session on September 29th, again during the before times, but as transportation opens up, and I know, for example, we've had to kind of shift our transportation options, it's important that people know what services are available for them. Next slide, please. A much more long-term heavy lift project has been the Improved Senior Bus, which is currently on hiatus due to the pandemic. The bus used to operate on a fixed route, and what would happen is people would be on the bus for about 4 hours to go grocery shopping based on the route and the geography of Montclair. It's a long, narrow township. We switched operation over to our local Transportation Management Association, which is called Easy Ride, and the bus is funded by the township. We started something called the Montclair Senior Bus Roundtable, and you can see some of the members here. It's comprised of older residents with a vested interest in the bus, and the roundtable guides the operation, and their feedback loop is written into the contract with Easy Ride. So it is institutionalized within the contract for the operation of the senior bus. The roundtable allows for flexibility to modify services as feedback arises, and previously the bus was stagnant. We couldn't make changes as quickly as we wanted to. Now we can add a stop if Easy Ride says go and the roundtable says go. So it allows us to be much more quick to respond. Residents now can arrange a ride from their homes to various destinations in Montclair, and the bus was operating Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. And the popularity was translating into a need to reserve rides well ahead of time. So one thing that I hope that you've taken away from all these initiatives, and that I hope you take away from this presentation, is how vital it is to engage older adults at every stage of the process. Older residents are doing most of the work here in my community, are guiding most of the work in my community, and are oftentimes evaluating a lot of the work. And I'll talk about evaluation a little bit more in the other session next week. So I hope that is something that feels tangible to you. Let's start working with older adults and engaging them at the ground level and incorporating in every level of the process. In closing, I encourage you to refer to our progress report, which is available on our website at lifelongmontclair.org. And I welcome the opportunity to collaborate to expand the reach of age-friendly initiatives. I'm always happy to talk about that. That's like my favorite thing to talk about ever. So please do reach out. I'm now going to turn it over to Kathy Rowe, the coordinator for SOMA 2 Towns for All Ages.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that introduction. And I'm just going, if you could put up the first slide for SOMA. I just want to let people know that one of the best experiences working in age-friendly initiatives has been the ability to share and collaborate, and SOMA, which is South Orange and Maplewood, New Jersey, is very, very similar to Montclair in demographics and layout and the housing stock, and we share a lot from Montclair. Our age-friendly communities are great about sharing. So my background is in public health. And when I first applied for this position, and I live in the town where I work,
one of the mayors challenged me and said, but you don't have experience in gerontology. And I said, but in public health, healthy aging is the goal of everything we do. Healthy aging is not just about gerontology and geriatrics and the medical care for seniors. It's about building the age-friendly community and everything that that involves. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, our mission here is to identify, develop, and coordinate resources, policies, programs, and services that support and empower all the residents of Maplewood and South Orange to age in place as full members of the community. And that means different things to different people. South Orange and Maplewood share a lot of services, mainly the school system, and they have a long history of being joint towns. There are times when they were one town, there were other times when they split apart, and I think in about 1920, 1930, they split apart and are as they stand now. But there's a long history of doing things together, and the residents of each community go back and forth in a seamless way. One of the benefits with our structure is having been grant funded all along, it's given us a lot more flexibility than if either of the towns had started this as solely a municipal position. You could go to the next screen. So where does age-friendly fall? If you look at most programs that are related to senior citizens, they tend to fall under health and or recreation. And there's good reasons for that, but each of those would have a certain spin they put on it. If it's under the health department, it will focus on medical, getting people to doctors, health initiatives, and all of that is wonderful. Under recreation, it could focus more under a senior center, activities and programming, and again, that's wonderful. But age-friendly really includes so much more. In our town, we've worked a lot with the police and fire departments, bringing in safety programs. We have a program called Operation Blue Angel, which several towns in New Jersey now have, that enables, it's a simple lockbox program that enables emergency responders to get into house quickly if they know that there's a senior inside who's not answering the door. Our tax department is vital in this. The tax department never realized before that they had a role in helping seniors age in place, but New Jersey has very high property taxes, and they've been instrumental in helping us educate people about tax rebate programs like the Senior Freeze every year and the Homestead Rebate Program. Our community development is one of the most important positions right now, departments right now, because we're looking at accessory dwelling units, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about those later. We're working on business improvement and getting the senior perspective in that. Last year, South Orange did its master plan, and having the senior perspective around the table was very important in building that. And in our engineering and public works, the pedestrian safety is a top interest to seniors, probably in every town. Next slide, please. So age friendliness is really the intersection where the different departments come together and overlap. Some of the challenges working for a municipal government is the silos. Municipal jobs are usually very clearly defined. They don't overlap in each other. And like you saw on the previous page, there are multiple departments that are involved with helping residents age in place. There's also a little bit of a challenge of it's not my job. If you work for the recreation department, it is not your job to work with the tax department or the police department. So our age-friendly initiative is kind of the fluid that fills the gaps in between. It also takes a very, very long time to make change in government. There are layers of review and committees and budget, and all of those are important. I say that, the checks and balance system is definitely in place here in South Orange and Maplewood, but because we're grant funded, we have a little more fluidity and flexibility to introduce ideas, to pilot programs, to experiment with change than the municipal departments do themselves. So our goals really are to fill in those gaps and pull the departments together. It's very important for us to raise the awareness of the role of older residents in our towns and to reach outside of town hall and find out what else is there, either public or private, that can help our residents, because our towns are very small and they can't provide a lot of services. They can't provide for all of the needs of an aging community. Yeah, the next slide, please. So our long-term view now, after 3.5, 4 years in, is looking at age-friendly in all things. And it's important to look at not just the projects and the programs, which again is what a health department or a recreation department might do, but to look at making changes at the policy level. California and New York State are doing this with age-friendly in all policy. And as I said before, being part of the master plan is of utmost importance. In our towns, we have as many people over the age of 60 as we have children in our school system. And most people don't realize that. The bulk of the municipal budget goes to the school system, not to seniors. So having them speak up, be heard, and be part of that long-term planning is really, really important. And then to have people participate in local government. We have committees, we have many, many committees, but this is not just about having a senior advisory committee with retirees on it. This has to include having senior citizens and older residents involved in other committees so that their perspective is shared with transportation, with public works, with public safety, to have them involved in as much municipal government as we can. Although there is such a thing as too many committees, but we still go on. Next slide, please. So our top accomplishments, I would say, has been communications. We realized early on that if we don't share what we're doing and don't let people know what we're doing, it really doesn't matter. And to build partnerships, we built a community calendar. There is so much going on in our towns. Like Montclair, we have a lot of different groups, but senior citizens aren't going to go to 25, 30 different websites or Facebook pages to sign up for notices. So we pulled that all together in one place to share with people. We also made age-friendly events guides so that the outdoor events or the community events could be more inclusive of our seniors. Next slide, please. Sometimes that inclusion is as simple as having a tent at an outdoor concert and a place for seniors to meet up. But some of the initiatives we started on our own were Repair Cafe. As people who know me know, this is my favorite. This was brought to my attention by a member of the Senior Advisory Committee who herself, she's all the way on the left there, she still works for the EPA, and she was looking for a way to bring this to town. What was important about this is the seniors felt like they have something to give still. They just don't want to be on the receiving end. They have something to give back to our community, to introduce something new, and to share it with all generations. You could go to the next slide, please. The other event our seniors have brought to town is the volunteer fair. We were looking at ways to encourage people to volunteer, introduce them to the local nonprofits, but realized if this was based and focused just for seniors, a lot of the nonprofits might not want to participate. They wouldn't see the value and the benefit of including older residents. So we open it up to the entire community, and we've had 3 so far. Our attendance has been over 300 at some of them. We've had people from, primary school children all the way through 93, and it's become a community event that a lot of people rely on every year, pulling us together. And again, the seniors are on both sides of the table here. They had something to contribute and give to the community. They don't want to just receive from the community. Next slide, please. So for people who are starting out in this, my first tip is to just partner with anybody who is interested. You might really be surprised. For us, it's been the arts and culture community. This photo is of an art walk. We made walking maps to encourage people to get out and get walking. And the local arts council took 40, 45 seniors, and even some grandchildren came with us, out on a mile walk around town to see murals, art installations, public art. It was one of our best reviewed events so far. And the last piece of advice is to get to know your community. Through surveys, through focus groups, through just interacting with people. There's a lot more there than just people who are, looking for something to do with a new time on their hand after retirement. We have a very diverse community. There's a lot for them to contribute. And it's really been an eye-opening experience to see what is here in South Orange and Maplewood. So that is all from me. I'm going to pass this over to Jackie from Age Friendly Teaneck. Thank you very much.
Welcome to Age Friendly Teaneck. Currently observing its 125th anniversary, Teaneck is the second most populous municipality in Bergen County, but the township retains a small town atmosphere in part because its housing stock is dominated by single family homes. Homes that were built to serve families with young children, but aren't as suitable for many of Teaneck's older adults who find large homes increasingly difficult to take care of and afford. Unfortunately, there are very few affordable options available for older people who want to downsize and stay in Teaneck. Slide 2, please. Teaneck's older population is growing. From 2002 to 2017, the township's overall population grew about 4%, but the over 65 population grew by more than 20%, and its over 85 population grew 61%. As in other communities, these older residents want to be able to stay in the community where they raise their children and have friends and connections, but they need access to affordable housing, reliable transportation, pedestrian safe streets, a supportive business climate, and opportunities to be engaged in their community. And until the advent of age-friendly Teaneck, not many people, including township leadership, seem to be paying attention to the impact of this growing demographic trend. Age-friendly Teaneck was launched in 2016 to make Teaneck a great place to grow old, as well as to grow up, to raise awareness of the needs of older adults and the value of older adults to the community, and to improve the quality of life for all Teaneck residents. Slide 4, please. Slide 4 now, thank you. Administered by the Brightside family and funded by the Henry and Marilyn Taub Foundation. Close to 50 older resident volunteers work with our leadership team as members of our task forces and steering committee. Slide 5. Age-friendly Teaneck's vital early support came from the township manager, the township's chief executive officer under Teaneck's form of government. Our first very visible accomplishment was to advocate to the manager in Bergen County for more crossing time at a major township intersection on a county road, which resulted in 3 additional seconds for pedestrians to cross Cedar Lane at Garrison Avenue. It doesn't sound like much, but because of the additional time, people of every age can now cross this busy intersection more safely. The publicity about those 3 extra seconds helped to raise the community's awareness of age-friendly Teaneck as a group that gets things done, and demonstrated that what's good for older adults is good for everyone in the community. Slide 6, please. At Age-Friendly Teaneck's strong recommendation, Teaneck became the first community in Bergen County to join the AARP Livable Communities Network in May 2018. As a member of the network, the township applied for and received an AARP challenge grant of $10,000 in 2019 to upgrade a dangerous intersection. Slide 7. Through the generosity of the Taub Foundation, we've been able to bring experts to the community, including the NJDOT to undertake a township walkability study, NJ Tippett Rutgers to train older adults to better navigate mass transit, and to facilitate age-friendly Teaneck's community asset mapping initiative, and New Jersey Future, which created a land use analysis of Teaneck from an age-friendly perspective. Age-friendly Teaneck brings resources to the community that benefit people of all ages. Slide 8, please. The support of a diverse group of community partners has been essential. We've co-sponsored the Senior Health and Resource Fair and programs related to end-of-life issues with Holy Name Medical Center. Local banks, law firms, senior living facilities, and a local pharmacy have provided funds to print our newsletter, Age-Friendly Times. The pharmacy actually mails out our newsletter with their monthly statements to Teaneck residents. Slide 9, please. Our popular magnetized resource directory, underwritten by community partner 5-star premier senior residents, was developed in response to a need expressed by first responders who are often called to households with chronic issues that are not true medical emergencies. Slide 10. With the League of Women Voters, we co-sponsored a public informational forum, Local Planning and Zoning 101, in response to concerns raised by residents regarding appropriate planning and zoning procedures for development projects. However, plans to co-sponsor a program with the League and the Teaneck Public Library in observance of Older Americans Month in May was one of the many events that had to be canceled due to the pandemic. Slide 11, please. Unfortunately, we had to postpone our long-planned community table, 4 monthly dinner events targeted to isolated older adults that had received generous financial support from the AARP New Jersey, as well as volunteer support from Meals with a Mission, Kosher Meals on Wheels, the Teaneck Rotary, Jewish Family and Children's Services, Holy Name Medical Center, and a township van to transport guests. It was heartbreaking to disappoint those residents who have very few opportunities to socialize. This vulnerable population continues to be a priority for us, and our social work intern keeps in touch with many of the invitees by phone. We're making plans with the Teaneck Public Library to produce a series of cable access programs to help Teaneck's older adults more comfortably navigate communications technology, cell phones, Zoom meetings in a time of social distancing, since we cannot bring groups of older people together at this point. Slide 12, please. We could not conduct our third geriatric career exploration summer internship for high school students, a dynamic 4-week program that offers 4 interns real-world interactions with older adults and one-on-one connections with professionals in a variety of geriatric fields. We've been working with Fairleigh Dickinson and hope to develop similar internship programs with them. During the pandemic, our newsletter blogs became even more important because we could not send out or distribute our hard copy of our newsletter. And that leaves out our most vulnerable older adults, and a problem that was confirmed in the survey that we developed to report to the Township Council next week. Slide 15, please. We're very excited about the Township's recent approval of a new affordable senior residence with ground floor community wellness center. Please skip to slide 15 now, as I have to sum up. But the new affordable senior residence with a ground floor community center and wellness center, which will be developed by our own executive director, Elizabeth Davis. This facility will not only provide a new senior affordable housing option and convenient access to resources, it will be a cornerstone of age-friendly Teaneck's efforts to work with the township to enhance the quality of life for its growing population. And with that, I thank you. Turn to slide 16 and turn this over to Emily.
Wow, thank you so much, everybody, for those wonderful presentations. I just want to take this moment to honor the historical moment that we're in, where I think just, even just 5 years ago, these presentations would not have existed because this work would not have been as developed as it is. And so for everybody who is coming to this conference, just starting out on their age-friendly journeys, or for those who have been at it for years now, I think there are many things to continue to learn from each other and to accelerate the pace of change by working smarter, not harder, in collaboration and in connection and in parallel with each other. So we're heading right up to the end of our time together, and I want to make sure Rini Carniel from the Grotto Fund for Senior Care can offer some closing remarks. But I just want to sneak in one question for our panelists. So panelists, feel free to jump on with your video and your mic when you're able. We had a question about age-friendly communities. Would you consider them to be a structured funded program or a concept, or both? If our panelists, one of you want to speak to that question with our live time. Are they structured funded program, a concept, or both age-friendly communities?
Emily, this is Christine. I'm happy to answer that. From my perspective, what I would say is it's both a structured program, a concept, and, you know, when we look at the communities in the network across the country, some of them have funding, like our communities here, many of them in New Jersey do, but a lot of these are not funded programs. They are initiatives that are, you know, run by volunteers or housed within local governments. But really, you know, it goes from not just being a concept to working within those 8 domains to have an actionable plan that you're then implementing. So there's, you know, structured programmatic work, policy work that's all embedded, you know, with this concept of making our communities great places to not just grow up, but grow old.
This is Kathy Rowe. I want to chime in and say, I think that it's, for us, it's been both. It's a concept, but without the separate dedicated funding, we never would have been able to move forward as much as we have. A lot of that funding has been used to organize and solidify multiple efforts and concepts that were going on around town. So I would say both, but a lot of it was there, but couldn't really all be pulled together into one place without dedicated funding.
Okay, well, thank you so much to everyone who has participated. And just want to remind everyone that we have our next session is next week. We're going to learn about Massachusetts becoming the 2nd state to join the Age-Friendly Network and some of the special attributes of their network. We've got some great representatives from government, as well as AARP and community activities. The second part, we'll be talking about developing metrics to guide your work. So we'll hear again from Emily and Katie and others. So please feel free to join us. I want to, just as director of the Grata Fund for Senior Care, I wanted just to remind everyone the Grata Fund is an advisory council of the Jewish Community Foundation, which is the largest community foundation in New Jersey with more than 450 million in assets. We're proud to, the JCF is proud to have other funds as well that are Jewish and secular, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing to impact the lives of older adults. We thank all of you for attending today. We want to thank all of our speakers for a very inspiring presentations. There's so much to learn. These recordings, as we said, will be posted along with the slides. So we look forward to any of you sharing this information with your friends and colleagues. Please, again, sign up for not only the coming session, but all 3 of the upcoming sessions. And finally, it's hard to end the day and wish everyone a very safe day ahead. Please, when you sign off, you will be linked to a survey. We really appreciate your responses. If you have any additional comments and would like to add them in the chat about how we can better do this program going forward, we would really appreciate that feedback. We'll keep that chat open for another couple of minutes. And again, we wish you a very happy afternoon and thank you for participating.